My hands were shaking so violently I could barely hold my phone as I pressed record. The laughter from the dining room was getting louder, crueler. My 25th birthday cake sat half-eaten on the table I'd just abandoned, its vanilla sweetness now tasting like ash in my mouth. Poor Penelope, my mother's voice drifted through the door like a knife. Still playing with her little charity projects at 25. My sister Cordelia's laugh was sharp enough to shatter glass. Remember when she said she wanted to make a difference? I almost choked on my wine. The walls felt like they were closing in. My chest burned with each breath. These were the people who'd hugged me 10 minutes ago, who'd sung happy birthday with bright smiles, who'd told me they were proud of me. She's embarrassing, honestly. Nathaniel's voice was the worst because it was so matter-of-fact, so casual in its cruelty. Rebecca's friends always ask what our sister does, and I have to make something up. What am I supposed to say? She makes $30,000 a year helping homeless people? It's pathetic. My vision blurred. 25 years of family dinners, of believing I was loved, of thinking they saw something noble in my work, all of it crumbling in real time. My birthday dress suddenly felt too tight, suffocating. Then my father's voice delivered the final blow. She's always been the disappointment. We just pretend otherwise to keep the peace. The phone slipped from my trembling fingers, clattering against the hallway floor. The recording was still going. Every poisonous word captured forever. They had no idea what they'd just created. Before everything shattered, I lived in what I thought was love. Every Sunday, I'd wake up in my tiny studio apartment with genuine excitement fluttering in my chest. Family dinner at the Hartwell estate, the highlight of my week. I'd spend hours getting ready, picking out dresses that made me feel worthy of sitting at their polished mahogany table. The 40-minute drive through tree-lined streets always felt like coming home. My mornings started at 6 with coffee that tasted like hope and emails from the shelter. Penelope, thank you for helping me find housing, read one from Maria, a single mother I'd worked with for months. My daughter drew you a picture. These messages were my fuel, my reminder that $30,000 a year could still change lives. At the nonprofit, I was respected. Valued. Sarah, my boss, called me irreplaceable. You have this gift, she'd say, watching me connect with clients others had given up on. You see people, really see them. I'd blush, feeling proud of something that came so naturally, caring about broken things, believing they could be whole again. But it was the family dinners that made me feel complete. Walking into that grand foyer, Mother would embrace me with what seemed like genuine warmth. There's my sweet girl, she'd whisper, her Chanel perfume wrapping around me like a promise. Nathaniel would ruffle my hair like I was still 12, and Cordelia would show me her latest design sketches, asking for my opinion as if it mattered. We'd sit around that massive table, crystal glasses catching the chandelier light, and I'd listen to their successes with what I believed was shared joy. Nathaniel closing million-dollar deals, Cordelia featured in Architectural Digest, Mother's charity galas raising hundreds of thousands. I'd contribute stories from the shelter, how we'd housed 15 families that month, how my new resource database was helping people find jobs. They'd nod and smile, asking gentle questions that made me feel heard. That's wonderful, sweetheart, Father would say, cutting his perfectly prepared steak. You're making such a difference. The warmth in his voice felt real. The pride in his eyes seemed genuine. Even Rebecca, Nathaniel's polished wife, would lean in with apparent interest. Tell me more about this housing program, she'd say, her manicured fingers wrapped elegantly around her wine glass. I'd light up, explaining the intricacies of connecting families with temporary housing, feeling like I belonged in their world of success and purpose. After dinner, we'd move to the living room with its Persian rugs and oil paintings. I'd curl up in the leather armchair that had been mine since childhood, watching them debate politics and business trends. Sometimes they'd include me, asking about social issues from my unique perspective. I felt like the family conscience, their connection to causes that mattered. The drive home was always peaceful. I'd replay conversations, feeling grateful for a family that celebrated different kinds of success. While they built financial empires, I built human connections. While they networked with powerful people, I lifted up the powerless. We were different sides of the same coin, each contributing to the world in our own way. My apartment might have been small, my bank account modest, but I was rich in love. Rich in purpose. Every night, I'd fall asleep thinking about how lucky I was to have a family that understood my heart, even if they didn't share my path. The irony burns now, remembering how safe I felt in that illusion. How completely I trusted their smiles, their encouraging words, their proud introductions to friends. "This is our Penelope," they'd say at gatherings. "She's the one with the biggest heart." I'd beam, thinking that was their highest compliment. I built my entire identity around being the Hartwell daughter who chose compassion over profit, who measured success in lives changed rather than dollars earned. I thought they respected that choice. I thought they loved me for it. Some illusions are so beautiful, so carefully constructed, that when they finally crack, the sound echoes forever. It started 3 weeks before my birthday, with a silence that lasted 2 seconds too long. I'd just finished telling Mother about our new partnership with the city's job training program when she glanced at Cordelia. Just a glance, quick, almost imperceptible, but something cold flickered in her eyes before the warm smile returned. "That's lovely, dear," Mother said, but her voice sounded different. Strained. Like she was reciting lines from a play she'd grown tired of performing. I kept talking, pretending I hadn't noticed, but my chest felt tight. Cordelia was studying her manicured nails with sudden fascination. Nathaniel cleared his throat and changed the subject to his latest acquisition deal. The following Sunday, I arrived early and heard voices from the kitchen. Through the crack in the door, I saw Rebecca whispering urgently to Mother, their heads bent close together. When I pushed through the swinging door, they sprang apart like teenagers caught gossiping. "Penelope." Mother's voice was too bright, too forced. "You're early. What were you talking about?" I asked, trying to keep my tone light. Rebecca's laugh sounded like breaking glass. "Oh, just boring charity committee stuff. Nothing you'd find interesting." But I'd caught one word before they'd noticed me: embarrassing. My stomach dropped. Were they talking about someone else? They had to be. But the way they couldn't meet my eyes, the way the conversation died completely when I sat down, it felt wrong. That night, I replayed every interaction from dinner. How Nathaniel had introduced me to his colleague as my sister who works in social services. The pause before those last words. How he'd quickly steered the conversation away when the man asked follow-up questions. I told myself I was being paranoid. Families have private conversations. People use words like embarrassing about lots of things. But sleep wouldn't come. I stared at the ceiling, remembering other moments I'd dismissed, rushed subject changes when I entered rooms, the way conversations seemed to brighten artificially when I joined them. 2 days later, I called to cancel Sunday dinner, claiming I was sick, just to see how they'd react. "Oh," Mother said, and I swear I heard relief in her voice. "Well, take care of yourself, sweetheart." No insistence, I still come. No offer to bring me soup. Just relief? I hung up and stared at my phone, my hands trembling slightly. 25 years of family dinners, and they seemed almost happy I wasn't coming. Something was very, very wrong. The bathroom door was heavy oak, but their voices carried through like they wanted to be heard. I'd excused myself during the main course, needing a moment to shake off the growing unease that had been clawing at me all evening. But as I walked back toward the dining room, I heard something that made my blood freeze. Laughter. Real, genuine laughter, the kind that bubbled up from deep in their chests, unguarded and cruel. My hand froze on the doorframe. In 25 years of family dinners, I'd never heard them laugh like that when I was in the room. Never. Poor Penelope, Mother's voice drifted through the crack, dripping with false sympathy. still playing with her little charity projects at 25. My heart stopped. Actually stopped. The hallway spun around me as the words hit like physical blows. Cordelia's voice joined in, sharp and mocking. Remember when she said she wanted to make a difference? I almost choked on my wine. Make a difference. With homeless people. No. This couldn't be happening. This couldn't be real. My family, my loving, supportive family, they couldn't be talking about me like this. Like I was a joke. Like I was. She's embarrassing, honestly. Nathaniel's voice was matter-of-fact, casual, like he was discussing the weather. Rebecca's friends always ask what our sister does for work, and I have to make something up every time. What am I supposed to say? She makes $30,000 a year helping bums? It's pathetic. The word pathetic echoed in my skull like a gunshot. My knees buckled. I pressed my back against the wall, my chest constricting so tight I couldn't breathe. 25 years. 25 years of "we're so proud of you and you're making such a difference and you have the biggest heart." All lies. Every single word. Rebecca's voice floated through next, and it was like listening to my own execution. I die a little inside every time I have to introduce her at parties. Oh, that's Nathaniel's sister, she works with the less fortunate. Her laugh was vicious. I make it sound as charitable as possible, but honestly, it's mortifying. My hands were shaking so violently I had to clamp them over my mouth to keep from screaming. The birthday cake I'd just eaten was rising in my throat, sweet vanilla turned to bile. But it was Father's voice that delivered the killing blow. She's always been the disappointment of the family, he said, his tone resigned, like he was stating an obvious fact. We just pretend otherwise to keep the peace. What else can we do? She's 25 and still thinks she's going to save the world one homeless person at a time. It's sad, really. The world tilted sideways. The elegant hallway with its oil paintings and Persian runner blurred through my tears. Disappointment. Embarrassment. Pathetic. The words carved themselves into my chest like a brand. Everything I'd believed about myself, about my place in this family, about their love, it was all a performance. A lie they'd been living for 25 years, and I'd been too stupid, too naive, too desperate to be loved to see it. My phone was somehow in my hands, recording everything. Some part of my brain, the part that wasn't completely shattered, had the presence of mind to capture their poison. Evidence of what they really thought of their sweet Penelope. Mother's voice continued, twisting the knife deeper. At least Nathaniel and Cordelia turned out successful. Penelope, well, we love her, but let's be honest. She's going to be living in that tiny apartment, making nothing, helping no one who matters, for the rest of her life. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Couldn't process that these were the same people who'd hugged me 20 minutes ago, who'd sung happy birthday with bright smiles, who'd raised me to believe that kindness was a virtue and helping others was noble. The recording continued, their laughter mixing with my silent sobs in the hallway outside. I had to go back in there. I had to sit at that table, eat my birthday cake, and pretend I hadn't just heard my entire world collapse. But first, I made myself a promise that would change everything. They had no idea what they'd just unleashed. I made it through the rest of dinner on autopilot. Somehow, I walked back into that dining room with a smile carved into my face like a death mask. I sat in my childhood chair, ate my birthday cake, and thanked them for the lovely evening while their laughter still echoed in my skull. When Mother kissed my cheek goodbye, her lips felt like ice against my skin. When Father hugged me, I wanted to scream. Drive safely, sweetheart, Cordelia called from the doorway, waving like the perfect sister she'd never been. I nodded and waved back, my hand moving like a broken marionette. The 40-minute drive home was a blur of streetlights and tears. I gripped the steering wheel so hard my knuckles went white, biting my lip until I tasted blood to keep from sobbing. Not yet. Not where anyone could see. My apartment had never felt smaller. The moment I locked the door behind me, I collapsed against it and finally let the dam break. 25 years of love, of family, of belonging, all of it had been a lie, and the sound that came out of me wasn't human. It was the sound of something dying. I crawled to my bathroom and stared at myself in the mirror. Same brown eyes, same ordinary face, same Penelope who'd believed she was cherished. But now I could see what they saw, the disappointment. The embarrassment. The failure who made $30,000 a year and thought she was changing the world. For 3 days, I didn't leave my apartment. I called in sick to work, letting Sarah's concerned voicemails pile up unanswered. I ordered food I couldn't taste and stared at walls that seemed to be closing in. Every time my phone buzzed with a family text, Mother checking if I was feeling better, Nathaniel sharing some work story, I wanted to throw it across the room. How long had they been laughing at me? Years? My entire adult life? I replayed every family gathering, every proud smile, every encouraging word, looking for cracks in their performance. They were there, I could see them now. The slight delays before their responses. The way conversations always seemed to flow more naturally when I wasn't participating. The relief in their voices when I occasionally missed dinner. I was their charity case. Their good deed. The pathetic little sister they tolerated out of obligation. On the 3rd day, I found myself sitting on my bathroom floor at 2 a.m., ugly crying into a towel. My reflection in the mirror looked hollow, broken. Everything I'd built my identity around, being the compassionate Hartwell, the one who chose purpose over profit, felt like a joke now. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was pathetic. But then something else stirred beneath the despair. Something cold and calculating that I'd never felt before. I stood up slowly, wiping my face with the back of my hand. In the mirror, I looked different. Older. Harder. The naive girl who'd believed in their love was gone, and something else was taking her place. I walked to my desk and opened my laptop. The emails were all there, dozens of them, buried in my inbox. Venture capital firms. Tech investors. Government officials who'd heard about my resource database project. All of them interested in the platform I'd been building in secret, the one that connected homeless individuals with housing, jobs, and services through artificial intelligence. My pathetic little charity work had caught the attention of some very important people. I'd been so focused on the day-to-day work at the shelter, so committed to helping people one at a time, that I'd barely had time to pursue the bigger picture. But it was there, waiting. $50 million in potential funding. 20 cities wanting to pilot the program. A Forbes journalist who'd been trying to reach me for weeks. They thought I was a failure. They thought I was embarrassing. They had no idea what I was capable of. I opened the first email and started typing. It was time to show my loving family exactly what their disappointment could do. The breakdown was over. The building had begun. The tears stopped on day 4. That's when the real work began. I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop, 3 cups of cold coffee, and a legal pad covered in notes. The apartment that had felt like a prison now felt like a war room. Every email, every business card I'd collected over the past 3 years, every connection I'd made through the shelter, they were all weapons I hadn't known I was gathering. The plan crystallized slowly, beautifully, like frost forming on a window. Step 1. I pulled up the contracts I'd been too humble to sign. TechBridge Solutions, my pathetic little charity project, had interest from Maven Capital, Breakthrough Ventures, and Goldman Sachs Social Impact Fund. $52 million in series of funding, to be exact. I'd been so focused on helping people one at a time that I'd barely glanced at the business side. But the numbers didn't lie. My homeless resource platform wasn't just changing lives, it was disrupting an entire industry. I started making calls. "Ms. Hartwell," said David Chin from Maven Capital, his voice warm with recognition. "We've been hoping to hear from you. When can we schedule that meeting?" Tomorrow, I said, my voice steady as steel. I'm ready to move forward. Step 2. I opened my database of shelter clients. Not their personal information, I'd never exploit vulnerable people. But their success stories. Marcus Thompson, former homeless veteran, now running his own security consulting firm after I'd helped him find transitional housing. Elena Rodriguez, single mother of 3, now a certified nursing assistant after using my job placement program. James Park, former foster kid, now a software developer at a tech startup. They all remembered me. They all owed their new lives, in part, to the woman my family called an embarrassment. I spent the next week in careful preparation. During the day, I worked at the shelter with renewed focus, but my evenings belonged to strategy. I researched Nathaniel's investment firm, mapping their client base, their recent losses, their reputation in the market. I studied Cordelia's design business, noting which clients valued social responsibility, which ones cared about their public image. The beauty of my plan was its simplicity. I wouldn't attack them directly. I would simply succeed. Spectacularly, undeniably, publicly. And let the natural consequences unfold. On Sunday, I returned to family dinner. Same chair, same smile, same sweet Penelope who made $30,000 a year. But behind my eyes, calculations were spinning. When Nathaniel complained about losing a potential client, some tech startup that's too picky about their investors, I nodded sympathetically. When Cordelia mentioned losing a bid because the client wanted someone with better community connections, I murmured supportive platitudes. They had no idea I was the reason their worlds were already beginning to shift. "How's the shelter work, dear?" Mother asked, her voice carrying that familiar note of false interest. "Oh, you know," I said, cutting my perfectly prepared meal. "Same old charity work. Nothing too exciting." Rebecca actually smirked. "Well, at least you're helping people." "I try my best," I replied, meeting her eyes with a smile that didn't reach mine. If they'd been paying attention, really paying attention, they might have noticed something different. The way I held myself straighter. The way I didn't volunteer quite as many details about my work. The way I seemed to listen more than talk, like I was collecting information rather than sharing it. But they weren't paying attention. They never had been. After dinner, I sat in my childhood armchair one last time as their beloved disappointment. Tomorrow, I would sign the contracts that would change everything. Next week, the press releases would go out. Within a month, everyone in their social circle would know exactly what Penelope Hartwell had built while they were busy calling her pathetic. I excused myself early, claiming exhaustion. Mother kissed my forehead like she always did. "Take care of yourself, sweetheart," she said. "We worry about you." "I will," I promised, and for the first time in weeks, I meant it. Walking to my car, I felt something I hadn't experienced since that night in the hallway: peace. Not the fragile peace of ignorance, but the cold, satisfying peace of purpose. They'd created a monster, and now they were about to meet her. The first domino fell on a Tuesday. "I don't understand it," Nathaniel said, his voice tight with frustration over Sunday dinner. The Henderson Tech deal was practically signed. $50 million in funding, and they just walked away. I kept my expression perfectly neutral as I buttered my roll. "That's terrible." "What happened?" "They said they found an investor who better understood their social mission." He made air quotes, his jaw clenched. Since when do tech startups care more about mission than money? Since their founder spent 2 winters in my shelter, I thought, remembering Marcus Thompson's grateful handshake when I'd helped him transition from the streets to his first apartment. Marcus, who now ran a successful security consulting firm and had very strong opinions about which investment firms actually supported social good. "Maybe they'll reconsider," I offered gently. "Doubtful," Rebecca interjected, her perfectly manicured fingers drumming against her wine glass. "Apparently this mystery investor has some kind of connection to the homeless community. Very authentic, very moving." Her tone dripped with disdain. I nodded sympathetically and changed the subject. The second domino fell the following week. Cordelia arrived at dinner looking shell-shocked, her usual confidence replaced by something that looked suspiciously like panic. "The Ashford Foundation pulled out," she announced, slumping into her chair. 6 months of work, my biggest potential client this year, and they're going with some nobody designer who apparently has better community connections. I made appropriate concerned noises while internally smiling. Sarah Ashford's daughter volunteered at my shelter every weekend. Sweet girl, very passionate about social justice, very vocal about which businesses her mother's foundation should support. "I don't understand what's happening," Cordelia continued, rubbing her temples. "It's like there's some invisible network out there, and I'm not part of it. These things happen in cycles," Father said dismissively, but I caught the worried glance he shot Mother. They were starting to notice the pattern. Not connecting it to me yet. Sweet, pathetic Penelope could never orchestrate something like this, but sensing that something was shifting in their perfectly ordered world. The third domino was the most satisfying. I was at the shelter when my phone rang, Nathaniel's number flashing on the screen. "Penelope," his voice was strained, desperate in a way I'd never heard before. "I need to ask you something, and I know it's weird, but do you know anyone in the tech sector? Anyone with connections to startups or social impact investing?" My heart raced with the thrill of it. The golden boy, Harvard MBA, successful investment banker, calling his embarrassing little sister for help. "I might know a few people through my work," I said carefully. "Why?" "We're hemorrhaging clients. 3 major deals have fallen through in the past month, all going to competitors who apparently have better relationships with the social sector." He practically choked on the words. "I'm getting desperate here, Pen. If you could just make an introduction, maybe put in a good word." I let the silence stretch just long enough to make him squirm. "I'll see what I can do." "Really? Thank you. I owe you big time." "You have no idea how big," I thought. But as I hung up, something cold twisted in my stomach. Was this who I was becoming? Someone who enjoyed watching family members suffer, even if they deserved it? Someone who smiled while inflicting calculated pain? I stared at my reflection in the shelter's bathroom mirror. The woman looking back at me was harder than the one who'd walked into that hallway 6 weeks ago. More strategic. More ruthless. Am I becoming like them? I whispered to my reflection. But then I remembered their laughter. Their casual cruelty. 25 years of lies wrapped in fake love. No. I wasn't becoming like them. I was becoming something they could never be, someone who built people up instead of tearing them down, someone who created value instead of just extracting it. The difference was that now I was doing it with my eyes wide open. The final signature on my Forbes interview was still wet when I walked into Sunday dinner that week. The article wouldn't publish for another 2 weeks, but I could already taste the sweetness of what was coming. They were about to learn exactly what their disappointment was capable of. Christmas dinner. The perfect stage for the perfect finale. The entire extended family was there, aunts, uncles, cousins, plus their circle of wealthy friends. Crystal champagne flutes caught the candlelight, designer dresses rustled against silk-upholstered chairs. The same people who'd watched me grow up, who'd smiled politely at my charity work, who'd probably whispered about poor Penelope behind closed doors. I waited until dessert. Until the wine had loosened tongues and lowered guards. Until everyone was comfortable, settled, unsuspecting. "I have an announcement," I said, standing slowly. The room quieted. 40 pairs of eyes turned toward me, some curious, some indulgent, all completely unprepared for what was coming. I pulled the magazine from my purse with deliberate calm. Forbes. The cover photo showed me in a sharp navy blazer, standing in front of the shelter, but the headline told the real story: 30 under 30, the tech entrepreneur who's revolutionizing homeless services. The silence was absolute. TechBridge Solutions just closed a $52 million series of funding round, I continued, my voice steady as granite. We're launching in 20 cities next year. Mother's face had gone completely white. Father's champagne glass froze halfway to his lips. But it was Nathaniel's expression that fed something dark and hungry in my chest, pure, dawning horror. I'm sorry, Rebecca stammered, but didn't you work at a shelter? I do work at a shelter, I said, meeting her eyes. Where I developed artificial intelligence software that connects homeless individuals with housing, employment, and social services. Apparently, solving real problems instead of just moving money around caught the attention of some very important people. Uncle Richard leaned forward, squinting at the magazine. Forbes 30 under 30? Penelope, this is extraordinary. Thank you, I said simply. Then I looked directly at my parents. Turns out my pathetic little charity work was worth something after all. The words hit like bullets. Mother actually flinched. Nathaniel's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. Pathetic? Aunt Helen looked confused. Who said anything about pathetic? No one, Father said quickly, his voice hoarse. We've always been proud. Have you? I interrupted, pulling out my phone. My finger hovered over the recording I'd kept for months. Because I have some interesting audio that suggests otherwise. The temperature in the room plummeted. Nathaniel went gray. Cordelia's champagne glass slipped from her fingers, shattering against the Persian rug. Penelope, Mother whispered, her voice breaking. Please. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw fear. Not shame, not guilt. Fear of exposure. Fear of what their friends would think. Even now, she wasn't sorry for what they'd said. She was sorry I'd heard it. For 25 years, you taught me that success wasn't about money, I said, addressing the entire room but never taking my eyes off my family. You taught me that helping people mattered more than profit. You taught me that kindness was a virtue. I paused, letting the irony sink in. I followed those lessons. And while you were laughing at me behind my back, calling me an embarrassment, a disappointment, a failure, I was building something that mattered. Something worth $52 million to people who understand the value of genuine impact. We never meant, Cordelia started. You never meant for me to hear it, I corrected. There's a difference. The room was so quiet you could hear ice melting in abandoned drinks. I tucked the magazine back into my purse and straightened my shoulders. I want to thank you all for this wonderful evening. And for the life lesson. You taught me that the people who claim to love you the most can hurt you the deepest. But you also taught me something else. I smiled, and it was sharp enough to cut glass. You taught me that when people underestimate you, when they dismiss you, when they call you pathetic, that's when you have the most power. Because they're not watching. They're not prepared. And when you finally show them what you're capable of. I gestured around the silent room. Well. The results speak for themselves. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Within a week, the Forbes article had made its rounds through their entire social circle. At the country club, at charity galas, at the private dinner parties where reputations were made and destroyed, everyone was talking about Penelope Hartwell. The family failure who'd quietly built an empire while her siblings called her pathetic. Nathaniel's firm lost 2 more clients that month. Word had gotten around about his attitude towards social impact investing, whispered through the networks I'd spent years cultivating. Turns out, when you lift people up, they remember. When you mock the work that saved their lives, they talk. Cordelia called me crying on a Tuesday afternoon. I don't understand what's happening, she sobbed into the phone. It's like there's a blacklist, and somehow I'm on it. Every potential client asks about my commitment to community engagement and then goes silent. I almost felt sorry for her. Almost. Maybe it's just a rough patch, I said gently, the same tone I'd used for years when they'd dismissed my work. Rebecca was the most desperate. She actually showed up at my apartment, her usual polish cracked around the edges. "Penelope, we're family," she pleaded, standing in my doorway like a supplicant. "Surely you could make some introductions? Put in a good word?" Nathaniel is beside himself. I looked at her perfectly styled hair, her designer handbag, her manicured fingers twisted together in anxiety. This was the woman who died inside every time she had to introduce me at parties. "I'll see what I can do," I lied smoothly, closing the door in her face. But it was my parents who suffered the most exquisite punishment, social embarrassment. Their friends couldn't stop talking about their brilliant daughter, the one who'd been hiding her light under a bushel all these years. At every gathering, someone wanted to know more about my work, my success, my vision. "You must be so proud," Mrs. Patterson gushed to Mother at the annual hospital fundraiser. "To think, she was revolutionizing social services right under your nose. How wonderfully humble of her to never mention it." Mother smiled tightly and agreed, never admitting that they'd had no idea because they'd never bothered to really listen. 6 months later, I was living in a penthouse overlooking the city. From my floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see the neighborhood where I'd grown up, where my family still gathered for their Sunday dinners. But I wasn't invited anymore. Not since that Christmas confrontation. Not since I'd shown them exactly what their disappointment was capable of. I thought betrayal had broken me that night in their hallway. I thought their cruelty had shattered something fundamental about who I was. But looking back now, I realize it did something else entirely. It rebuilt me. The woman who'd cried on her bathroom floor for 3 days was gone. In her place stood someone harder, smarter, more strategic. Someone who understood that love without respect was just performance art. Someone who knew that the people who underestimate you aren't your enemies, they're your greatest advantages. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah at the shelter. "The new facility opens next month. 200 beds, job training center, child care services. You did this, Penelope. You changed everything." I smiled, setting the phone aside. Outside my windows, the city sparkled with possibility. Somewhere out there, families were finding homes because of my platform. People were finding jobs, rebuilding their lives, getting second chances. That was worth more than any apology my family could offer. More than any dinner invitation they might extend. More than any relationship built on lies and false smiles. I'd learned the most valuable lesson of all. Sometimes the people who hurt you the most give you the greatest gift. They show you exactly who you are when everything else is stripped away. And sometimes, that person is more powerful than you ever imagined. The girl who believed in their love was gone. But the woman who'd built an empire from their mockery? She was just getting started. My name is Penelope Hartwell, and I was right about one thing: some betrayals cut too deep to heal. But I was wrong about everything else. Sitting in my penthouse office, watching the city pulse with life below, I pulled out my phone and found that recording. The one I'd made in their hallway, hands shaking, heartbreaking, world collapsing. I hit play and heard their laughter again, their cruel words, their casual dismissal of everything I'd built my life around. Poor Penelope, still playing with her little charity projects. She's embarrassing, honestly. She's always been the disappointment. But this time, the words didn't cut. They didn't burn. They almost sounded grateful. Like a gift wrapped in poison that had finally revealed its true purpose. They thought they were breaking me that night. They thought they were putting me in my place, reinforcing the natural order where I remained small, grateful, content with their scraps of false affection. Instead, they gave me something infinitely more valuable: clarity. The Forbes magazine sat framed on my desk, 30 under 30, the tech entrepreneur who's revolutionizing homeless services. Next to it, a photo from last week's TechBridge Solutions ribbon-cutting ceremony. Me standing with the mayor, surrounded by families we'd housed, workers we'd employed, lives we'd transformed. My phone buzzed. A text from Mother: "Sweetheart, we miss you at Sunday dinners. When can we talk?" I smiled and deleted it without responding. They were begging for my forgiveness now, but some transformations are irreversible. The daughter who'd believed in their love was gone, replaced by someone who understood that the greatest revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's becoming so successful that their opinion no longer matters. I closed my laptop and stood, looking out at the city that had embraced what my family rejected. Tomorrow, TechBridge would announce our expansion into 10 new markets. Next month, we'd unveil our mental health services platform. They'd called me a disappointment, an embarrassment, a failure. They'd been right about one thing: I had failed. I'd failed to stay small. And that failure had set me free.